All right, guys, thank you for making it. We're starting a little bit earlier today. It's always fun to see great entrepreneurs like yourselves here. We've got some new faces as well. Today we're going to be talking with one of my good friends and mentors, Robin Pimentel from K5 Ventures. He's actually been very instrumental in helping our startup get off the ground and get to where we are today. So I hope you guys will get as much value out of him the next 30 minutes as we have in our relationship working with Robin. But to start off, Robin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and K5?
Sure. So I come from a technology background. I started out as a double E. Actually started out as a co-op at Intel. It was supposed to be a 3-month co-op, and it actually turned into a 2-year co-op. Learned a lot, and also learned kind of the limits of what I could do at the time with the education that I had. So I got really good at doing a lot of the digital stuff, a lot of the ones and zeros. But when you get into mixed signal and analog, in order to really learn it well, you have to have a lot of differential equations, and I was a freshman in college and was probably going to do that the next year. So after a couple of years, I kind of realized that I needed to go do something else. So I moved over into the physical side, doing ASICs. So I went to work for a company called Cadence, and I did a lot of place and route. Worked on a interesting DARPA project that was at the time a multi-ALU processor, and it was a research project from a professor called William Dally. He was kind of in between MIT and Stanford, and now he's actually the CTO of NVIDIA. But at the time, multi-ALU was, and he helped design a lot of Cray systems, and he was an innovator and really early researcher in on-chip networks. So I got some exposure to networks, and which ended up being kind of a little bit of foreshadowing for what would come later in my career. It was a great project. I learned a lot, and then I went back to school for a while. Got a part-time job turned into a full-time job. Learned a lot about building infrastructure, a lot about how engineers work, a lot of workflow. Continued to leverage a lot of my silicon experience in the silicon world, and kind of parlayed that into a series of then next moves in my career that led me to building large-scale networks, or what are now called clouds, essentially highly distributed, highly available, and widespread clouds. So I had a good career as a technology person, as an engineer, then as an executive. Joined a few companies very early stage, so got to see a lot of early stage startup problems. Learned a lot about products, learned a lot about marketing, managing, growing an organization, developing, raising money, all these things that kind of go with that hat, with wearing that hat. And then I was at a TCA event in 2011, maybe 2012, and I ran into Amir and Ray, and at the time it was kind of the formative stages of K5 and K5 Ventures, and I like with many things, I got to know them over time, and we decided to kind of go on this adventure together. And so we've been investing and working on the ecosystem here in Orange County for a long time. I know I'm a new face to a lot of you. I tend to be on the startup development side, whereas Ray handles a lot more of the community side of things and the ecosystem. So, but I think if you're a K5 company, then you probably work with me. That's kind of a little bit about us. The way we're positioned in the ecosystem in terms of a fund is that we're very involved. We get hands-on in the beginning, and entrepreneurs that are new have an opportunity to learn a lot. But I think even repeat entrepreneurs like Andrew are able to absorb a lot from us, and so we invest with capital, and we also invest with our effort. We invest with our time, and we invest our expertise. So it's a lot of kind of sweat capital, if you will. Converting the sweat equity, but also a lot of financial capital as well, and helping you raise money and closing the next round. Our job is essentially early stage funding, so we work from the very, very beginning up until you're not at early stage anymore. You're into your Series A and your Series B.
And the way that K5 works here in Orange County, because we have just a few funds, you guys might be familiar with Okapi, you guys might be familiar with Toba, and K5, we only have a few of them. You guys are actually hands-on, what do you mean hands-on, in the fact that it's not, you guys are really trying to help us. We meet with you guys once a week, so can you, I'm not sure if that's for every K5 company, but can you get a little delve about what that means?
Yeah,
and what
sure.
you guys do?
Yeah, and we have relationships with all of the firms out here, and even a lot of the individual investors within TCA, people that are loan gunmen. I operate as an angel, but I'm not a member of TCA. I have a different process that I work with, but I'm great friends with everyone at TCA. There's not a single person that I've met there that I haven't liked. So it's a great structure and a great thing to have out here. What we do differently is we try to set up a little bit more of a development cycle. So when we take on a founder or a founding team, what we look for is, first of all, amazing people. People come first. We look at their ability to create product comes second, and then we look at the business model, and of course profits fall out of that. But profits is just one way of saying traction. Right? Some companies are built not to profit in the beginning, and I think it's difficult to finance a company in Orange County when it's not profits first. I think it's more common in the Valley. And so I think what we try to do is figure out, well, what is the thing that's actually creating value? And if it's not profits in the beginning, then profits may become a metric, revenue may become a metric, but it's not the ultimate goal of the company. The ultimate goal of the company is to create value. So when we work with entrepreneurs, it's to try to help them refine the vision, refine that direction, and kind of shape how they're thinking about their product and how they're thinking about their company, and then apply some discipline to it. So, when we talk about product, when we talk about growth, when we talk about financials, it's all about the detail. It's all about that discipline. And so we work a lot with developing the founder's methodology to become much more diligent and disciplined about things. And I think learning that, perfection is a lot of small things done right. There are founders who I think thrive in that type of structure. You guys were already pretty savvy coming in, but at the same time you were able to absorb a lot and do a lot and execute and make it your own. And I think that's really important because there's no single piece of advice that I can give to a startup that will universally apply to every startup. So our job is to kind of provide a lot of experience. The one advantage, you guys are, the startup is the expert on the product, the expert on the market, and if you need help developing that expertise, we help you develop that, but you're still the experts. We might give you some tools, some methodology, some process to help you be even better, but that's you guys. Our experience comes from having dealt with hundreds of companies, hundreds of startups. If you combine the experience of all the partners that we have access to, we might even be close to 1,000 startups that we've all had experience with. And so our experience is that we've drank from the fire hose and we've bled financially because of it, and in some cases profited financially because of it. So what we can expose you to is a lot of the what not to do, but also a lot of the methodology that we're getting to the answer. But the answer isn't something that can be just handed over. The answer is something that gets developed and shaped, and through that process, there's an exchange. But I'll tell you honestly, there are also entrepreneurs that are not a good fit. There are entrepreneurs who want to make their own mistakes. They want to just make it on their own. They want to say, I did this, and nobody else is responsible for the success but me. And in those situations, we try to provide the support. Typically we don't engage, but if we do engage because we see some potential there for the future, we see that they may be on the cusp of something that could change things for them, then we try to provide support still. We don't try not to walk away from people that need help. But it's just, the analogy I like to use is like, a really dried up sponge and you're trying to pour water on it, and most of the time it just sheets off, right? So you just have to kind of prime the sponge a little bit and see how much it absorbs, and not try to force knowledge into an entrepreneur, because that's just not how you get things done. That's not productive.
What's your opinion, single founders versus, co-founders and things like like that. How does K5 look at one or the other?
I think we're very opinionated in that situation. We definitely like multiple co-founders. We believe it's a much more resilient organism.
Why is that?
A single founder, it's a situation where it can be a single founder, but it can also be a founder that is dominant with respect to his other co-founders. So if you've got a person that's just too strong on the equity side or on the willpower side, then, or even if it's a single founder with a lot of staff around him, we think that it's not as resilient. So when you hit a wall, it's very difficult to maneuver yourself around the wall. When you're when you have a few people lost in the forest, you can at least yell out to each other and triangulate and say, okay, we're roughly around here, and this is how far away we are from each other. When you're a single person in the forest, it's not a lot of resilience, and if you get demoralized, if you run into a wall, if you have to pivot, you have to carry the entire bag on your shoulders, it's very difficult to survive pivots, it's very difficult to survive the mental shift. It's very hard to also avoid making mistakes because you're making all the decisions. So when you have strong conviction as a single founder, that's typically what companies are single founders, is very strong conviction, and there's no one there to really challenge you. And I think good founders should be able to challenge each other in a pursuit of truth. It shouldn't be a pursuit of egos or a pursuit of who has the strongest will. There's some truth that's out there, and through metrics, through evidence, through interaction, through discussion, you can walk each other and somehow find that common truth. And I think that happens a lot better when it's a team.
How do you guys deal flow? How do you guys find startups for K5?
We're pretty agnostic in terms of how startups come to us. So we have, of course, our web presence. We get a lot of applications there. People reach out to us through LinkedIn. We pick up interest at events all the time. We organize events all the time. Ray's very good at fomenting and getting the community to act and helping to shape the ecosystem, which is one of our explicit goals, to try to affect the Orange County startup community in a positive way and try to increase its momentum.
So you're a venture partner at K5. Can you share a little bit about what specifically you do at K5 with the companies and the investments?
Sure. So a venture partner is someone who interfaces with the startups primarily. I started out as an LP with K5, and as I was able to kind of transition away from my prior executive role after meeting some commitments that I had signed up for, including building an organization, a brand new, very large network to do streaming.
You want to talk a little bit about what you were doing before?
I think a lot of you can probably look it up on LinkedIn. But I worked for David Terry, who's the CEO of a company called Gaikai out here. We sold it to Sony. So I was with the company 2 years before we got acquired.
That was $400 million. Is that what it was at the exit?
Yeah. And so I stayed for an additional 2 years afterwards. So the company started in January 2010. I joined in the June-July timeframe of the same year. So about 6 months after we moved into the space. And then 2 years later was the acquisition, and then I stayed 2 years to meet some commitments. I have a lot of respect for the founders, and I wanted to really help them transition through the acquisition and really get things going with good momentum and establish key leadership roles.
And Brandon from Oculus, the founder of Oculus, actually came out of your company, right, of Gaikai?
Yeah, I would say he maybe had a very significant and really significant contribution. But for him, it was probably a pit stop. He had just sold his company, I think, Scaleform.
Yeah.
And was a great influence in terms of product.
He was VP of product at Gaikai, right?
Yes, and then I think chief product officer in a way. Too.
Okay.
So he's pretty pivotal during one of our pivots, actually. Not to reuse the word too much, but yeah.
And before that, you were at Facebook, and were you at Google too?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, my career eventually took me through basically a tour of Silicon Valley. So I spent almost a decade in Silicon Valley, and those companies were part of my stay there. And Google had maybe 5,000 employees or something like that when I joined.
And then you went to Gaikai pretty much when it was on the ground up, right after that pivot.
Yeah, under 20 employees. And when we sold it, we probably had 70, and then when I left, we have close to 200 employees.
Awesome. Now, so you're involved with startups. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so essentially I work with startup development. So that's working with the founders through hard times. It's founder psychology. It's how to communicate with investors, how to set yourself up for success, how to raise money, how to create really good value for your customers or your users, how to grow. So a lot of what I do is really try to instill a psychology and approach, a framework that's very scientific and so very data-driven, very objective rather than subjective. I like to say, and you've heard this before, that I think as innovators, as entrepreneurs, we have really great intuition. So we understand our markets kind of almost from the inside, right? They're almost like our persona. We really embody our market, we really understand them, and we have great intuition. And I think intuition is really great for building a vision, right? So when you see your company 5 years later, you're trying to get a product, you're trying to hit a certain scale and growth in that 3 to 5 year time frame, when you're hitting your stride, you want to hit the market at some point in the future. So you have to visualize what that market will be in the future. And I think intuition is really great for that. But then you need strategy to get there, right? And what you need for strategy is intelligence. And you know, not just IQ, but startup intelligence, product intelligence, growth intelligence, even management intelligence, how to grow your team, how to acquire talent, how to get people that share your passion around you with you know, really high aptitude and throughput, and getting them to stay, right? Getting them to not churn and go somewhere else, get distracted. So that requires a startup IQ, startup intelligence, and I think that then yields strategy, which gets you to that endpoint. But product can really only be built empirically through measurement and through data. So I don't think, as good as someone can be, I don't think that you really can build a full-fledged product without picking up signals from the market. I don't think you can model the market in your brain entirely and say, I know I'm right about this. And we've had a lot of companies that were built that way. That was the tradition, actually. If you rewind back to the early 2000s, late 90s, people would be in stealth mode for 4 years, build out these crazy products, hundreds of features, just years and years of development, millions and millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions, and then they would launch. And then it's like, oh, where's the market? And oh, people are only using 1/10 of our features. So why is that? So I don't believe you can actually build companies that way. I think companies that have succeeded that way have been a combination of luck and greatness, of course. But I think in general, it's a little bit like winning the lottery. I don't think it's the way that you want to build a company. So we work a lot with companies, and you know, it's not just me, but we have a lot of other partners that work with companies to develop them. So I know a lot about product and growth and scaling and things like this, and organizational development. But one of our partners, Stan, of course, knows a lot about manufacturing, PLM process, robotics, signal processing.
I laugh because literally one time I met Stan at his office, and for fun, he's building like a camera thing with a gyroscope, and it doesn't move. I mean, you can move the car up and down. It's just like
camera.
Yeah, and he's just doing it for fun, and he's got all these signal processing. The guy's such an awesome, like, inspiring nerd.
Yeah. Well, his prior company, he sold to Ross Robotics in Canada, but his prior company was a camera robotics company, and he has a film background. Actually, he actually graduated from film school, but he's always been in electronics.
It's so funny, film, but then he's like a great engineer.
Yeah, and if you want to do contract manufacturing, if you want to understand how to build things with quality out of China and out of other places, there's no one that I know that's better at it.
So let's talk a little bit about the talent pool, not the talent pool, but the focus. Because one thing that we absolutely love about K5 has been, if somebody's lucky enough to get you guys as a partner, We get exposure to, BI people, business intelligence people. We get engineering, through you, and product through you. Talk a little bit about the disciplines and the support systems for entrepreneurs at the firm.
Yeah, so as you said, we've got a lot of different disciplines inside. We've got essentially a large entrepreneur network. So we have a lot of what I would call experts in residence, and we certainly count you as an expert in that network on the commercial real estate side, on the product side now, on things like product with latency, long latency loops. And we had a conversation about control systems and what latency does to them, and how to work around that, how to bolster your product even though you have that. I say that it includes everything. It's product, it's manufacturing, it's robotics, it's organizational development, it's being a CEO, it's founder psychology, it's business intelligence. Ryan is great with data, of course. And we also have
Ryan. If you meet Ryan, Brady also came from Gaikai. The guy literally will send us an email asking us for data so you can play around with it on the weekend.
Yeah. Because he's, I think we're all we're all geeks at heart, right? I mean, and we're all just really passionate about something. There's something that we're always geek out on, and for Stan, it's a robotic camera.
Yeah.
For Ryan, it's data. But we have also a few guys that do machine learning, that do data science as it applies, as machine learning applies to data science.
Yeah.
But also as machine learning applies to digital signal processing, to image recognition. So I think we have a good amount of partner expertise inside our fund, and and even if you look at like all of our LPs, they all come from different backgrounds as well. Some of them have payment processing, based in law.
Yeah.
It's just all over the place, and we just tap that as we need it. So we're kind of that allows us to actually be open to all kinds of other talents on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell you what we don't have. We don't have anyone who's really good with medical devices. We don't have a partner who's an expert in that yet. Someday we might. So we don't take on a lot of that. We don't have a partner that's good with pharma, so we don't take on a lot of that either. So there are things that we don't take on, but we're not necessarily one of these hyper vertical venture funds that only does robotics and machine learning.
Let's talk about that.
Sure.
What kind of companies do you guys, does K5, look into?
We look at everything. I think one of the things that you find these days in funds that are running lean is that they typically try not to invest in physical products because there's a lot of opportunity to get something wrong. Software, you can iterate very quickly. You can have a new version of software out at the end of the sprint. It's very hard to have a new version of your hardware out at the end of a 2 or 3 week sprint. And a lot of funds, because of that, shy away from that. We don't. We love software, of course, but we also love physical products and any kind of innovation. So we're pretty agnostic. If we think we can help, if we think we can inject some knowledge, if we think we can inject some experience, then I think we typically take it on.
What is it? Only technology?
Typically, there's a technology streak running through it, right? So,
like
your company for us is basically technology driven. You operate in a commercial real estate market, but you're a technology software company.
I mean, you guys have Orange Lab, right? And
Yes.
they're technology, but they
Also
are
very
baked
software
goods.
driven. Yeah, it's so there's not a single oven that they own. There's not a single recipe that is theirs. What they are is essentially an intelligent e-commerce, but it's also a community.
Mm-hmm.
It's also more than a dessert, and I think that's something that the company strives for. Because I think a lot of companies, when you think about what is the long-term vision, what makes a startup is the ability to, as you assimilate that long-term vision, to really scale up.
Yeah. Now, you've been out here. You used to be in the Bay Area, moved here, Gaikai. So you know the landscape for startups in Orange County. Can I get a little bit about your opinion on the OC startup ecosystem and some advice for the entrepreneurs who are looking to get funded?
So Do you mean like Orange County specific advice about getting funded, or do you mean like differences between the Valley and Orange County?
I mean, just Orange, let's focus on Orange County, because I think most of us know the difference between the different dynamics of the fundraising up there versus here.
Sure.
You touched upon that a little bit earlier when we're talking about profits before the profit thing. Are you seeing the startup community in Orange County grow?
Yes, and I'll say that I think the challenge in Orange County is actually not raising money. The challenge in Orange County is actually putting together a killer team with killer culture that retains and is successful over the long run. But in terms of being funded, it's not difficult to do here.
Can we talk a little bit more about what you just mentioned? Like, based on your experience, how can a founder go about putting a killer team together in Orange County?
Okay, so I think that speaks to what are some of the things that we could do better in Orange County, and I think one of the key things that we do a little bit different is culture. I walk into a Silicon Valley startup. I have still a lot of friends that I see up there when I visit, and I walk into an Orange County startup, and there's actually a very pronounced difference in the culture, right? Silicon Valley company exudes culture, and I think it's actually very important, no matter what your culture is. I don't think there's any such thing as bad culture. I think culture can be almost anything. The one thing that it should be, but isn't here, is explicit and strong. When somebody walks into your company, it should be very clear what you're about. When you have a candidate standing across the table from you, and you're interviewing them, everyone that talks to them should exude the company culture very clearly and very well defined. And I think that's important because that's the time, when you're first meeting a candidate, that's the time when you want to know if you're a fit. The earlier, in fact, the sooner you can figure out if you're a fit, the better, right? And the worst case is somebody comes in, you see that they're contributing really well, but they're an oddball in your culture. They don't fit in. And 3 months later, you lose someone very productive, right? That's very, very painful. And you've invested 3 months training them, getting them up to speed. So I think that's kind of the worst situation. That's the polarity of that continuum, right? I think the way that you avoid those problems is by trying to fail as fast as possible, as you would with any business model, you would with talent. And so by exuding your culture very strongly, that person will either say, oh my gosh, I love this place, this is exactly what I've been looking for, I want to be here. Or they'll say, this is not for me. That's okay, that's what you want. You want that to happen as soon as possible. And when I walk into Orange County startups, the biggest complaint I get is that it's hard to find talent and then it's hard to keep it. Well, culture is a big part of that. Are you doing your part to attract the talent? Is the light bulb shining brightly so that you have a beacon in the night that people can flock to? And furthermore, when you have a strong culture, when times get tough, when you have to go through a pivot, that culture is like a binding agent. It's like a glue. It makes you very resilient. It helps you survive the hard moments when money might be running out, the entire business model might be coming into question, and just when you need everyone to gel together and come up with the solution and get through that moment and really, really then be on the upslope and make it and have that epiphany, have that eureka moment. Little plug there. That's when people need to gel and come together, and that's often when teams fall apart out here. That's often when founders clash, and I think having strong culture helps you keep people and helps you attract people.
Let's talk about entrepreneurs getting funded. It sounds like it's not hard to get funded out here. Some people tend to believe. I mean, most of our funding came from Orange County. So we've been luckily, knock on wood, successful in Orange County. Can you talk a little bit about why you think it's not tough and what recommendations you will make for an entrepreneur trying to raise funds out here?
Well, I think it's not tough because people are getting funded all the time. Startups are getting funded all the time out here, whether it's individual angels, whether it's structured funds, whether it's tech host angels. There are a lot of people raising money very successfully. It depends on what structure your company has and what support system you might be able to find. But in general, you've got startups that are product and beer focused, like iPolrit, for example. You've got products like I think Ground Metrics out of San Diego. They were all
They're oil and gas, right?
Yeah, oil and gas, all angel funded through 2 rounds, so Series A, Series B, and even some bridge financing in between. So I think it's not difficult to get funded in Southern California. I don't think that is the challenge. I think if you put together a killer team, have a good vision, you have a good direction, you have a good idea of how you're going to succeed, and you're willing and able to absorb the help that's around you and absorb all the resources that are here and pull. Because that's the thing, right? In the Valley, it's such an echo chamber that you just get reinforced with these principles all the time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, right? There are a lot of truisms in the echo chamber. There are a lot of things that are true, and people execute them verbatim to find out that, oh, that actually wasn't right for me. And so I think the ability to filter out, there's a lot of things that are true but may not apply to you. And a founder's ability to filter out that information can determine whether they succeed or not. And so, and you and I have had this conversation before about there's a lot of advice out there that's true, but why is it true? What is the foundation behind it? What's the basis upon which that truth is built? If you go back to first principles, you can very easily reason, does this apply to me? Does this work in my market and for my team? And so, for that reason, I think here in Orange County, you as a founder, because the echo chamber isn't as strong, you have to pull that from your investors. And I think getting funded is easy. I think creating value is hard because it takes more than money to create value and succeed.
If some of our startups out here wanted to somehow figure out a way to get into K5 or have a conversation, how would you recommend they go about doing that?
We screen companies all the time, and as I said earlier, we're pretty agnostic in terms of how we get approached. We love being introduced through entrepreneurs like yourself. We love people reaching out on LinkedIn. Some people apply to our online presence, our website. So, any which way, we often have events that we put together that involve some small pitch competition, a little 2-minute elevator pitch thing. A lot of us participate in like the Harvard Business School clubs, and so we do everything to try to ferret out all the startups in Orange County. And there are startups in Orange County who didn't get funded in Orange County. Gaikai, for example, Dave already had a very strong network, and he wasn't funded here. He didn't need to be. He had a very clear idea of what money he wanted and why he wanted it. And
Russell Canyon invested in Gaikai, though. They're based out of LA.
Yeah.
Santa Monica area. Okay.
But not Orange County.
Yeah, right. Well, we have a high concentration of funds in LA, Santa Monica area. All right, thank you, Robin. I'd like to turn it to the audience to see, I'm sure you guys have questions.
Yeah.
Steve, you've got the mic, right?
Yeah. I'll throw one out to you right off the bat as somebody who's looking to add to my team. Can you give me an idea? Generally, you're looking for somebody, you need them on the team right now, and you've got a short time frame in order to acquaint yourself and see if they're a good cultural fit before you bring them on board. Can you give some tips or questions or some ideas on what we can do when we're looking to add somebody? I think that oftentimes cultural fit is more important than everything else. So what can we do when we're interviewing people to identify whether they're going to be a good cultural fit?
Yeah, I think sitting across the table and exuding culture is definitely one approach. If you've got a lot of throughput, there's only so much you can do with any individual candidate. So if you've got to interview 100 people, there's only so much you can do. But in general, what I like to do is be opportunistic about it. I think you should always be hiring. You should always be open to acquiring new talent. And that's a little bit of, why you can raise money when you're doing well and you don't necessarily need to raise money. A lot of people will say, well, I don't want to raise money right now. And that actually has a side effect of saying, well, now I need to delay all my hires until I raise money. And so I think it's okay to have a little bit of pockets that you can absorb talent when it's opportunistic, when it lands on you, or when you run into it. But if you're going through a process where it's not opportunistic and you're trying to get someone in now because now is the time that you need them, and you didn't anticipate it, or the future is too far out and you need them now. I think doing things that don't scale for me is probably the approach. So have them come in, have them see the space, have them meet lots of people, take them out to a lunch, and all the time exude the culture, right? Make sure everyone is essentially in the mode where they're looking for a new partner, someone new to work with, right? So it's a little bit like like dating. You just want to be open, be transparent, and just exude your personality, exude your company's culture, and then you find out very early on. Now, in terms of talent, because Orange County is the place that it is, because it's so disparate, there's so many different pockets and things. There's Aliso Viejo, there's Costa Mesa, it's Orange, it's very spread out. And so what I would say is, I actually try to find and look for aptitude rather than experience. So if there's a guy who's been doing, C for a long time, but he's got the aptitude and wants to do something else, and I need him to do Python, that's totally okay with me. If he's been doing Ruby for a long time and I need him to do JavaScript, and I'm willing to absorb that person's skill acquisition within my company. I'm willing to take them on and say, like, hey, you have no JavaScript experience, but come learn on the job, because I believe in your potential. I believe in you fitting into my culture. And
that goes a long way,
great
too.
things. Yeah.
Especially with loyalty, because you're investing in them.
Yeah, and I think it's really important in Orange County where you don't have rows deep of every single type of developer. Right? Not everyone you need is going to be a full stack developer. Everyone needs a full stack developer. They're just like not a factory out here cranking them out.
We got a question in the back. Oh, Ron. Okay.
So, you mentioned that primary focus of K5 has been mostly on software products, but you did support some physical products.
Yes.
Can you just give us some examples of physical products that right now you are integrating?
Sure.
Repeat the question so that we can get those.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, that muffled, that mic does sound a little muffled. So the question is, essentially, can we give some examples of companies that are making physical products inside of K5? So we're working with one right now. It's called Push, and what they do is they build it's a high resolution prosumer device that essentially is a measurement device. So there's a lot of activities out there where you'd like to know what you're doing relative to other people. So they make a device that, again, really great GPS, really great gyros in it, really great embedded software, and you can use it in motorcycle racing, and mountain biking, boating, airplanes. There's a lot of airplanes that are from the 80s, 90s, 70s that don't have a lot of instrumentation, and this device recreationally can actually tell you a lot about what you're doing inside of an airplane, inside of a yacht. If you're out in Newport and you're sailing and you'd like to see relative to other people what's going on. So yeah, that's an example of a product that's active right now in our K5 process.
Sure. We have 3 more questions. We got to get Robin to a meeting, so if you have questions, you may want to get in the queue.
All right. Hey, Rob.
Hey.
What was your name, by the way?
My name is Costin from
You're
Anaheim.
what? Oh, from where?
Anaheim.
Okay.
Watch out. So you've spoken about fundings happening in Orange County, and I see fundings at the seed stage and at the early stage as well.
Good point.
I will say, that's the 95 percentile that I see, and I think what I've seen is Orange County companies having a hard time graduating to a true Series A. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why that is, and what it would take to get more Orange County companies to get true Series A funding of 10 million plus.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that there are a lot of venture funds that do operate out here. So Miramar, we have a relationship with them, they operate out here. Okapi, they helped Connect to Fire a little while back. They were part of their inside now. They're part of their rounds, their early rounds. Toba is out here, and they operate as well. We actually get a lot of interest from Silicon Beach out here as well, so we have a lot of connections there. And a lot of our partners have connections to Silicon Valley, including myself and a lot of firms out there. So we try to make sure that when we talk about early stage pipelines, that there is, at the end of that pipeline is a Series A, Series B, and we do try to make sure that those things are accounted for and taken care of. What I'll say is, I think the number of successful companies that go from Series B to either getting acquired, having some type of exit, getting acquired, IPOing, there's just not a strong legacy of that. And so because of that, I think it's difficult. Now the money's out there, I'll tell you that, I think the money's out there. I think what we need to do is actually put together a really compelling story in the traction and in the metrics, in terms of product love, how much people love the product, what's the retention, what's the engagement, have really strong signals and really strong case built, and then I think the money will be there. But you're right, it happens a lot less. Absolutely right.
It sounds like we're syndicating most of the deals out. We're bringing in partners from
Well,
Silicon Beach, Silicon Valley.
In some when it makes sense, because K5 can, do a Series A. That's definitely the case. It's a very specific case because there are other Series A venture companies, venture funds that are much more aligned with what individuals may be doing, right? So like For Life is out here. When they hit their Series A, we have a very specific target in mind for them who can really help them scale. We can take on a Series A and help in a particular vertical to scale. There's actually maybe 3 verticals that we can do. But the chances that the companies that we're helping in the early stages fitting into one of those 3 verticals is very small. So we have to complement that, yes.
Okay. Next question.
Hey, Oliver. So I have a fintech startup, and very soon I'll be looking into getting some funding. So I'm curious that you mentioned a little bit about traction. Is there a certain level that VCs expect you to have met, specifically your industry or the model that you have, that you should have achieved a certain level of traction before they really consider you?
So I think it depends on I'll repeat the question briefly. So is there a certain level of traction that a company should have, and yours is in particular fintech? So is there a particular traction level that we would look for in a fintech company? And I think the answer is, traction is an emergent property. Traction is something that when things are working right, you can kind of use that as a measurement, as corroboration, but the core thing is actually the creation of value. And so if you have an engine that is very healthy, the actual traction depends on what stage you're in. So if you've raised $2 million, you've got 50 people, and you've just come out of a pivot, the traction needs to catch up, right? Because your funding and the state of your company is far ahead of where you may be with traction. That's one situation. Another situation is you just started, but your traction is far ahead of what you can keep up with, and where you can scale, and then you need funding for that. That's a different situation. So I think there's no specific number, but what you want to see, you want to demonstrate, is how much people love your product and how much value you're creating for your users or your consumers. And if you can put together a strong case for that, then I think that's really all that matters, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. When you take your pulse, what you're measuring is essentially your skin, elevating when you apply pressure. You feel the pressure there, but that's a signal of your heart beating, right? And so again, when you're creating value, there are a lot of signals, including traction. But is that traction that has been with you from day one? Is that traction that comes in droves and then cycles out constantly? So it all depends on your business model and what you're doing. So I think there's no one answer for your question.
Do you have any more?
Do you make suggestions for the classic catch-22 where to get funding you need top talent, but that you need, to get the top talent, you need the funding. Is it ever okay to go for funding when you've identified people who want to join the team, but can't until the funding comes in? Can you present it in that way?
Yeah, I think, you know, I definitely feel, I have a lot of empathy for that situation. But, you know, strictly from a value creation standpoint, I think when the vision is strong, when the promise is strong and has a lot of certainty, the talent will be there. So if you've got 2 co-founders or 3 that have a lot of conviction about their idea and they really, really believe in it and they know they're going to succeed in doing that, then it's not an issue of money. Because we know plenty of people who have kids, just got married, you know, and they sacrifice in order to bootstrap and get things going. And so I think, you know, whether it's someone that can give you 10 hours a week to create and execute part of that vision, and they're willing to do it because they believe at some point the company will be able to hire them out outright. So I think there are lots of things that you can do as a founder to overcome those hurdles. I think that those hurdles are not, I don't think that that's a permanent catch-22. I think that you can innovate your way out of that catch-22. And I think there are a lot of ways to maneuver that, whether it's you know, just the founders or acquiring talent or getting people to do something. But ultimately, what you really need is execution. What you really need to get funding is to demonstrate that some core group of people, because the people come first, because the people are the ones executing and creating value, right? Ideas are cheap, ideas are everywhere. But when somebody strongly believes in an idea, in a market, in a place in the future where those things will come together, and you can actually start to do something and execute on that idea, that execution is actually what gets you funded. And then you say, well, these people are available to come on board full time.
All right, thank you, Robin, for making it out. I know that you've got a meeting after this. I do want to thank our sponsor, the Eureka Building. There you go, remind me, right? The Eureka Building, thank you very much for the coffee, the bagels, and the setup here. Taylor, Kurt, can we get an applause for this? So, a little information on the Eureka Building. It's a co-working space. It's very technology focused. They have individual suites, like a traditional office building. They can deliver anywhere from 1,000 square feet to 10, 15,000 square feet. They also have co-working space upstairs with a lot of startups. So you can rent a desk, you can rent a dedicated desk, you can rent your own unit, anything.
Great staff, great management.
Yeah. Great staff. Actually, it was founded by an entrepreneur who's also a VC. So, Peter Polidor. And if you guys want to check it out, it's eurekabuilding.com. So thank you. Robin?
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.